All right, well, hello everybody, and welcome to part 16 of our little beginner series that we have going on here. At this point, our project is basically finished. So we've modeled our interior, we've lit it, we've furnished it, and then, we've also incorporated all kinds of really cool materials in it. So if you think about it, at least according to our vision, we're done here and we're ready to render out the final images and/or animations. So at this point, really go ahead and pat yourself on the back. If you've watched all the video entries in this series, well, then you now have quite a lot of knowledge and you're ready to go out and start, tackling projects that are similar to the one that we've created right here. All that said, there are still a couple of topics here that we would still like to explore, even if just on a more surface level. But these topics kind of build upon some of the things that we talked about earlier in this series, or, there's just some functionality that we still haven't covered that we think might be useful to you as beginners. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing in this video, in this tutorial. All right, so enough of that jibber jabber. Let's go to work here and let's first explore how we can use LightMix to just render the scene once and have drastically different lighting scenarios in it. So if you take a look at the lighting setup we have going on in this, a variation of our scene that we've been working on here, you'll be able to notice that we've got 3 different V-Ray sun and sky setups in there now. And each V-Ray sun, just so you know, has a different intensity and position. So if we now go ahead and we get LightMix going in our VFB, well, what we can do now is we can disable sun and sky setups B and C, for example, and we get a daytime looking lighting scenario. Now that's all fine and dandy, nothing really epic there, but if we now disable the A setup and we go with the B setup, well, look at that. We now have a bit more of a late afternoon-like lighting scenario in our scene. And if we now toggle the B setup off and we turn the C setup on, we get a more sunsetty lighting scenario going. And so as you can see, we got 3 different lighting scenarios from this one render. Because remember, this is LightMix. We didn't have to re-render anything. It's all coming from that one single rendered image. So effectively, just by rendering the image out once, we can now have 3 different lighting scenarios going in it. Now that's practically magic by all accounts, and we aren't even done yet here because this workflow works with HDRIs as well. So here we have 3 different dome lights, and each is being driven by a unique HDRI bitmap. We'll now enable all the dome lights and we'll start the rendering process, which obviously it needs a second to start up as these HDRIs are somewhat large. But anyhow, once the rendering has started, we can go under our LightMix settings in the VFB, and now we're going to disable all the V-Ray sun and sky setups, and then we'll just toggle 2 of the 3 HDRI-driven dome lights off. As you can see, that nets us a more overcasty look. Now we could at this point perhaps go in and tweak the dome's intensity a bit, just to play with how much light it throws out there in the scene. Or, we could, if we don't like the setup, we could just disable this dome light and enable a different one, which obviously gives us a totally different result. Now, if we are still not happy, well, how about we disable the current dome and we toggle the third one on, which again gives us a totally different lighting scenario that we can obviously still tweak if we want to. And as a matter of fact, if we tweak the other lights in the scene as well, we can fairly quickly get to a pretty cool looking nighttime result without having to render anything out more than once. So basically magic. All that said, there are a couple of things that you need to be aware of when working with LightMix, even as a beginner, okay? So LightMix, by design, the way it was designed to work was that you use it to tweak your lighting's intensity. And that doesn't mean that you 50x the light's intensity, but instead you just maybe make the lights a little bit dimmer. You maybe make them just a little bit more intense looking. Now, if you go with really drastic changes to the intensity of the lights, like turning off the light itself, or maybe going with a really high intensity value for it, okay, well, then you're gonna sometimes be able to notice that you get a lot of fireflies in your image, especially on the areas where that light is well, it doesn't have a direct impact on the lighting on those parts of the scene, right? So as you can see, in our case here, we're tweaking the overhead sofa light, and the sofa seems relatively noise-free, but everything else is quite very noisy. Now, why does this happen? Well, we're not going to go into it in too much details, but what's important for you as a beginner to know is that when V-Ray is rendering out your image, it doesn't see the LightMix version of your image, it sees the RGB version of your image. And so when V-Ray is calculating this image, it basically sees what we see here. And this overhead sofa light in our example here, right, doesn't really have a profound effect on the rest of the scene here, okay? So if we go ahead and then we go into LightMix and we 50x the intensity of this light, there's just not all that much information about what this light is doing to the rest of the scene because, well, in reality, if we just go with the with its original intensity here, you can see that it really doesn't really have that much of an effect on the rest of the scene. And so, you know, sampling is adjusted accordingly. And so when you 50x this light, for example, you're going to get a lot more noise in your image. Now, that does not mean you can't use LightMix on a scene such as this one, for example, and make drastic changes to the lighting. You can. We just demonstrated that a couple of minutes ago. But in certain situations and with certain light combinations and intensities, you might run into the problem that you're just going to have more noise in your image. Now, one of the most beginner-friendly ways to combat that is to just make sure that your RGB image, okay, so not your LightMix image, is sort of really balanced out so that it's not too contrasty, lighting-wise, that is. So that basically means that the sunlight is not way stronger than the skylight, and the overhead sofa light is not too dim or just overpowering all the other lights or anything like that. Okay, the idea is that you end up with this pretty much overexposed looking image where all of the lights have almost equal contribution to the overall lighting in your scene. And so if you set up your scenes like this, well, then you're just going to have a little bit more leverage for when it comes to making these huge adjustments using LightMix. Although do note that obviously if you do approach it this way, well, the rendering process is going to take longer because now you have all these light sources that, you know, are just brightly illuminating the entire scene and they're all equal in strength. And so that's a little bit tougher to calculate. All right, so now you're hopefully starting to get an even better sense of just how powerful LightMix can be. So it's not just about tweaking lighting intensities and tweaking the light's colors. It's also about having the ability to render the image once, but have multiple drastically different lighting scenarios in that one rendered image. Now, since we're talking about things that are really useful, let's also talk about the built-in V-Ray light lister. So you can access the V-Ray light lister just by simply going under the V-Ray menu up here, then under tools, and then you just hit the light lister button. And there you go, you have that V-Ray light lister right in front of you. Now, why is the V-Ray light lister so cool and so useful? Well, let's just, for example, say that we wanted to select and control the lamp floor light source that we have here, okay? So without the V-Ray light lister, what we would have to do is we would have to hunt for that light object, whatever it is in our scene, right? There it is, and then you need to select it, and then you can tweak that particular light. Now, in a bit of a simpler scene like the one that we have in front of us here, that's not that tedious, but if you have a more complex scene, this process of hunting down lights can be, well, it can be a lot more tedious. So with the V-Ray light lister, well, finding that one particular light source is very easy. So as you can see, that lamp floor is right here in front of us, and we can very easily and quickly, for example, tweak its color, right? We can tweak its intensity, its units, and then we can also control, you know, some of these basic light properties that we have here. And so, as you can see, the V-Ray light lister makes it very easy to have a good overview of all the lights in your scenes, and then it also gives you the ability to control their most common properties in a very efficient manner. Now, what makes it extra easy to control your lights here and to find your lights here with the V-Ray Light Lister is the fact that you have these different categories of lights available to you right here. So if you want to control or find your rectangular and sphere lights, well, they will reside under this rectangular and sphere lights category. If you just want to see your dome lights in your scene, right, then you just switch over to this category of the dome lights. If you just want to see the V-Ray sunlights, then you switch to this category and so on and so forth. And additionally, on top of that, if you type in the name of the light in this field up here, well then, that's the light that you're gonna end up isolating in the lister. Oh, and for all of you that really like to customize your Cinema 4D's layouts, well, you'll be happy to know that the V-Ray Light Lister can be docked anywhere inside Cinema 4D. And so if you're into your own Cinema 4D layouts, well then, you can make V-Ray Light Lister be a part of that ordeal. All right, and so that's it for the V-Ray Light Lister. Next up, we're going to talk about the V-Ray Toolbar, which is another really handy functionality, if you will, that makes accessing V-Ray's features a lot quicker. So to get the V-Ray Toolbar going, well, we're again going to go under the V-Ray menu up here, under Tools, and then as you can see, you have this V-Ray Toolbar button right here. Now for me, the V-Ray Toolbar opened on my second screen. I'm just going to drag it over. There we go. As you can see, it's right here. Now, this thing can be really useful. It can really speed up your workflow because it gives you quick access to a lot of that V-Ray specific functionality. So you want to create a new rectangle light? Well, just click on the rectangle light icon, and there you go. You have a new rectangle light in your scene. You want to, for example, open up Chaos Cosmos. Click on the button here, and Chaos Cosmos is going to pop up and initialize right in front of you. Okay, so a couple of other things that you can do here is you can open up the V-Ray VFB itself, right? As you can see, you can start the interactive renderer, you can start the final render, the production render, and then obviously you also have, you know, your V-Ray Clipper shortcuts here, your V-Ray proxies, V-Ray scenes. If you wanted to add, for example, the environment fog in your scene, just click on the little button here, and it's in your scene, just like that, okay? Now, if you want to dock the V-Ray Toolbar anywhere inside of Cinema 4D's UI, all you have to do is you just need to click and hold your mouse button on these little dots here, and then you can just drag the entire thing anywhere you'd like to, okay? And so as you can see, this can really speed up your workflow because all of those really cool V-Ray features, functionalities, and so on and so forth are available to you from this toolbar that you can, again, dock anywhere you want to. All right, so the next topic that we're going to be tackling here is how you can create masks for the objects that are in your scene so that you can more easily manipulate them in your favorite post-production software. Now, a bit of a disclaimer before we start here. There's multiple ways that you can set up masks in V-Ray. We're just going to show you one of the ways that we think is probably the easiest. Okay, so what you got to do here is you go under that V-Ray menu again, and you just open up the render elements, menu itself. Okay, in here, you want to scroll down until you get to the matte category, and in here, you want to bring in a multi-matte render element. Okay, then in here, I'll just make this window a little bit bigger. You want to make sure that the consider for AA toggle is toggled to on. You really want to make sure that this is set to on. Otherwise, you're going to get jagged edges in your masks, which is something that you do not want in most situations as a beginner. And now after that is done, we're just going to change the mask type here. We don't want to use separate channels. We're just going to use the white mask type here. Okay. Now, next up, what we want to do here is we want to go into our object manager. And let's say, for example, we wanted to create a mask for our curtains. We're going to right click on our curtains here. We're going to go under the V-Ray tags. We're going to put an object properties tag on it. Now, let's pause here for a second. Nejc from the future here, in case you haven't noticed. In case you're using Cinema 4D 2023 and upwards, well then that V-Ray object tag is not going to be under the V-Ray menu here, but it's going to be under this extension menu, and then you go under V-Ray tags, and then you put that object properties tag on it. Okay, so just a bit of a difference between the different Cinema 4D versions that you're using. All right, so in the object properties tag, we're going to set the object ID here to say 1, for example, and we're going to match that ID in the multi-matte properties here as well. Okay, so we're just going to set it to 1. Now, before we start the rendering process here, let's just also make sure that our multimatte render element is named descriptively. So let's just call it the multimatte curtains render element. And with that done, what we can do here is we can just start up the V-Ray renderer. In our case here, we're just going to start up the interactive render, just to demonstrate that you can have your render elements working whenever you're doing interactive rendering. But they're also obviously available if you're doing the final or production render. Now let's give V-Ray a second to load everything up. There we go. And now if we just go in here, right, you're going to be able to see that in here with this drop-down menu, you have the multimatte curtains element, render element here. And as you can see, that's the mask for our curtains. Now, again, this is just one of the ways that you can create masks for your objects. If you want to learn about all the other common ways of how you can get masks out of V-Ray, well, then we suggest checking out our YouTube tutorial on that very topic. We just go a little bit deeper there because there's multiple different ways how you can achieve the same or similar results with V-Ray. And the idea is that you have the flexibility to approach creating masks the way that you see fit, the way that it makes the most sense to you, and the way that makes sense for the project that you're working on. All right, okay, but now there's one more thing that we should talk about here, and that is how you can save out your masks when you're doing your final renders, okay? And so one of the ways to do that is to simply have your save here be enabled, right? And then you input where you want to save your files, you select your file format, etc., etc. But then what you should also do is you should also make sure that you have your multipass output enabled. You also, should define where this is going to get saved as well. You should pick the file format that works best for you. And at this point, there's only one more thing that you should do, and that is to add a post effects multipass. With a setup like this now, when we hit render here and when the render is finished rendering, well, then we're going to get our masks saved out as our multipass image or images, depending on how you set your multipass up. Now, that's one way how you can save out masks using V-Ray. The other would be to just not bother with any of this, okay? And just go under V-Ray here, under Common, and in here you want to toggle the Use V-Ray Output System to On. In here, you're going to specify where you want to save your files, and that's it. At this point, all you have to do is you have to hit Render, and you're going to get your masks saved out, okay? Now, this way here uses the V-Ray output system, so it completely ignores the Cinema 4D saving system, if you will. And so you can choose whichever one makes more sense to you, essentially, okay? All right, so we're making really good progress here, and there's basically just one more topic that we would still like to talk to you about, and that is how you can leverage Chaos Cloud to get your renders out faster. Okay, and so that's exactly what we're going to be talking about next here. Now, if you don't know what Chaos Cloud is, it's our cloud-based rendering service, which allows you to render out your images on the cloud. So this way, you don't have to render things locally if you don't want to. Now, that also means you can have your local render nodes, if you have any, be rendering out a totally different project, for example. Or, you can simply use the cloud to speed up the rendering process. Chaos Cloud is very simple to use, and it is integrated into V-Ray seamlessly. Both CPU and GPU rendering is supported, and you can render out still images as well as animations. All right, but so then, how do you upload your scenes to the cloud, and how do you have them be rendered over there? Well, that's what we're going to show you next here. And so we have our scene open here, and as you can see, there's a bit of a camera animation that we have going on here right now, okay? It lasts for 750 frames, and just a bit of a camera move, the camera is moving away from that sofa, right? That's all that there is to it. And so if you wanted to upload this scene to the cloud, all you have to do is you basically just need to go under the V-Ray menu up here and click the Submit to Chaos Cloud button. But before you do that, it's always a smart idea to make sure that your render settings are all set up correctly. So let's double check our render settings here real quickly. We're going to go under the output menu here first. And for the frame range here, because we want to render out an animation, we want to make sure that we're rendering out the entire Cinema 4D timeline that we have here. So we're going to set the frame range to all frames. Then if you want to, you can also, adjust the resolution, but we're just fine with this smaller output right here, okay? Okay, next up, let's go under that V-Ray menu and under the V-Ray submenu. And in here, we can choose our render engine. We're going to go with V-Ray. And because we're going with V-Ray, which, renders on the CPU, we're also going to change the sampler type from progressive to bucket, just because bucket is a little bit more efficient at rendering on the CPU, okay? Now, we did test out the noise limit for with test renders here, so we know that the noise limit of 0.01 is going to work great for us, so we're just going to leave it at that, okay? Okay, then we're going to go under the common submenu here, and we're going to talk about this very important setting here, the V-Ray output system setting. So if you don't have this toggle to on, well then the output you're going to get from the cloud is going to be in the EXR and JPEG file formats, okay? Regardless of how you set up the saves under this Cinema 4D save menu here, the cloud's gonna ignore this, okay? And so if you're not using the V-Ray output system, you're gonna get EXRs and JPEGs. But if you toggle this to on, well then, as you can see, you can select your file format from here. Although do note that not all of the file formats are supported on the cloud. If you want to know exactly which ones are, there's going to be a link below this video that you can check out for more information on which file formats are supported. Right, so the file format that we're going to go with here is going to be PNG. That's going to work great for us. And so now all we have to do here is we just need to make sure that we input some sort of a file name for our output. So we're just going to go with the name of raw. Okay. Now, as far as the denoiser go, you can go with one of these built-in denoisers, or if you like to denoise in post-production, you can also disable the denoisers. That's what we're going to do here, just to show you that it works. Okay. And with that, you're pretty much all good to go. So at this point, you can just close the render settings. You can go under that V-Ray menu here, and you can just click the Submit to Chaos Cloud button. This pop-up's gonna pop up, and you can just select the Export and Submit button here. When you do that, you're going to see that there's going to be this progress window, and it just basically it means that V-Ray is getting the scene ready to be exported and uploaded to the cloud. Now, once the export is complete, you're going to be greeted by this website, by this interface. In here, you can make some last-minute changes to the resolution and to the frame ranges and so on and so forth. And you can also, organize how everything is set up on the cloud. So what do we mean by that? Well, as you can see right here, you have the Select Project drop-down. And as you can see, we already have a couple of projects going here for our masking tutorial intro. We were rendering something out for that. And then also, we have a bit of a testing project or test project set up here. Okay, so these are just ways that you can keep your jobs on the cloud organized better. And so I'm just going to create a new project here, and I'm going to call it the V-Ray Beginner Series project, okay? And we're just going to create it, all right? So then we can name this particular job. So this is, you can think of the project as the folder, and then the job that you're submitting, this actual renders that you're trying to do, this is what you define by the name here. So we're going to call it the camera away from sofa animation. Okay, so you can use better English if you want to. That's actually recommended, but anything goes. Whatever helps you stay organized. Next up, as we mentioned, we can change the resolution here and the aspect ratio and so on and so forth. We're not going to do any of that, but of special interest is this cameras sort of menu here, okay? And in here, you can select the cameras that you want to render from. Now, we didn't name our cameras all that descriptively, but I know that we need to render out camera.2 here, but you can actually select multiple cameras, as you can see, right? And so then you're going to get basically renders from this camera and all the other cameras that you've specified, okay? So you don't need to re-upload your file if you just want to render from a different vantage point. Okay, so that's really useful. Then you've got your output naming here. You can choose where the name goes, whether it's at the front or maybe, the camera names first. Kind of depends on how you want to do things, really. And then also your frame range, you can adjust here, and your frame step. So if you want every other frame to be rendered, you can set this to 2, and then every other frame in this frame range is going to be rendered. Okay. Now, you also have this upload only button here. If you toggle it on, you're just going to upload the scene, but the rendering's not going to start. We don't want that. We're just going to make sure that it uploads and it immediately starts rendering. So we're going to have this be toggled to off. And then all we have to do is we just need to hit submit. Okay. Now, once you do that, you're going to see that your scene is going to start getting uploaded to the cloud. And at this point, it kind of depends on how fast your internet connection is. And you're just going to have to wait a little bit for the upload to finish. Now, once the upload is done, you can hit the View Job button here, and you're already going to be seeing that your scene is, well, getting rendered. There's a lot of rendering happening right now. We have 750 frames, and you can see everything's progressing rather nicely. Okay, so now we're inside Chaos Cloud here, inside its main interface, and let's just go back a little bit here. Let's click on the home button. And as you can see, here you have your recent jobs and your active jobs, jobs that are currently being rendered. So we have our job name here, and you can also see which project this job belongs to. Now, if you want to take a look at all the projects that you have set up in cloud, you can hit this project folder here. And as you can see in here, you have those folders that we talked about earlier, right? Those projects. So we rendered out the masking tutorial intro here. If we go in here, you're going to see that in here, we're going to have jobs pertaining to this project. But we're not interested in the masking tutorial. We're interested in the V-Ray beginner series. So we're going to click on this folder, this project. Right? And in here, we have this current job that's being rendered as we speak, right? As you can see, there's quite some progress being made already. So if we click on this job, you're going to be able to see that now we're inside the actual job, and we can see all the individual frames and their status. If we click on one of the frames here, well, then you get that preview in front of you. Okay, and this is actually getting updated every few seconds, basically. And as you can see, there's already parts here that are kind of done rendering with that bucket sampler type. There you go. As you can see, it just updated. And so this way, as you can see, you have a very good overview of what's happening on the cloud, right? You also have your stats here, the resolution you're rendering with, the render time, all the frames, all the output, and all the credits that you've spent currently on this job, right? Now, what you can also do is you can pause the entire job by hitting the pause button. And once you do that, you're going to see that the download button is going to become available to you. And you can now download this image, even though it's not even finished rendering yet. Now, it's going to be super noisy and all that, but you can do that if you so want to. Or, now that you've paused the job, you can also just resume it. All right, so what we're going to do here is we're just going to pause this recording and we're going to let the cloud do its thing. And we're going to come back when we have all the images rendered out. Right, so Chaos Cloud has finished rendering for us here. And now what we can do is we can, for example, we can preview the animation, right? Just by hitting the play button. Or, what you ultimately want to do is you want to download your file. So you can hit the download button up here. Then this dialog is going to appear in front of you. In here, you can choose how you're going to download your files. So you can use the Chaos Cloud rendering app. Or, for example, you can also just download your files from with your browser, right? But in our case here, we're just going to go with the Chaos Cloud rendering app just because it makes things super easy. We're just going to hit download with Chaos Cloud rendering app button here. We're going to open the link. Okay, and then we're just going to select the folder. It's just going to be a temp folder for us here where we're going to download these files. We're going to hit select folder, and now our download process is going to start here. Now, obviously, how long the downloading is going to take kind of depends on how many gigabytes of files you have, and it's also going to depend on your internet speed and so on and so forth. But once the downloading process is complete, you're going to end up with all the output files on your computer. And so as you can see, Chaos Cloud is super easy to use. It has a lot of functionality built into it. And well, it can just make your life easier for when it comes to rendering stuff out. All right, and so this is pretty much it for part 16 here. At this point, we would really like to thank you for coming along with us on this journey. We hope you've learned something new here. And if there are still topics that you think that we should cover that are relevant for beginners whenever they're tackling interiors such as the one that we've tackled right here, right? If that's the case, please let us know in the comments below. We are not afraid of adding an additional video where we try to demystify some additional functionality or anything like that. But by and large, we do think that with all these 16 parts, you have enough knowledge to tackle similar projects as we did right here. Now, if by any chance you followed along with us here and you've ended up with final images of your own, well then please share them with us. You can share them over on our forums. We have a gallery section over there, or you can use the link that's in the description of this video to submit your artwork to us. And who knows, maybe we're gonna include it somewhere on our website. So please feel free to share your creations with us. You know where to reach us, on the forums or in the comments below. We always try to be there for you. And again, thank you for tuning in. Please stay curious. Please always keep on learning. Stay humble. Be nice to other people. That's always good advice, right? And we'll see you in all the other tutorials that we have planned. Thank you for tuning in. Take care. Bye-bye, people.